Hello, I'm Jon Delano, KDKA-TV political editor. Thanks for joining us for Inside Pennsylvania Politics. This is one of two editions focused around the Republican National Convention, and will return in August for the DNC and the Democrats, followed by more weekly discussions this fall as Election Day approaches. We have assembled a panel of young, politically active Pennsylvanians from diverse backgrounds and opinions. Elections are about the future, so who better to talk about that than the young? So when we designed this show, I said, we only need one old guy on the panel. That's me. Everyone else is a few decades younger. Joining us on the left side of our panel, Shelley Pikelick, a Mount Lebanon Democrat and mother of 5 children, and Christian Sesek, Washington County Attorney and chair of the Fayette County New Deal Democrats. And on our right, Isabella Russo, Oakmont resident and a member of the Allegheny County Council of Republican Women, and Rico Elmore, vice chair of the Beaver County Republican Committee. Let's get straight to the biggest news story of the time, one that happened right here in southwestern Pennsylvania. Former President Trump survived an attempted assassination at a rally in Butler County on Saturday. The gunman is deceased, but a rally-goer was killed and 2 other audience members were critically injured. Let me begin by acknowledging one of our panelists, Rico Elmore, who was at the rally and came to the aid of one of the injured people. Rico, thank you again for your service.
Thank you.
Since that horrific event, we've heard Democrats and Republicans calling to tone down the temperature in the campaign. But Trump's vice presidential pick came out swinging at President Joe Biden even before we knew anything about the gunman, whose motives are still unknown. So with all that being said, did Saturday change the campaign? Has the rhetoric calmed down, or are we back where we started? Shelley, let me start with you.
Sure.
What do you make of what happened? A horrific, I think everybody would agree on that. It should never have happened.
Right.
Has it changed this campaign?
Right. Yeah, no, certainly we can get that out of the way, right? I mean, this is a tragic moment and certainly should never have happened. Has it changed the campaign? I think it's intensified it, certainly on the Republican side. I think that this is probably a galvanizing moment for Republicans and is definitely going to have an impact on what happens.
How about the rhetoric, Isabella? Do you think that changes much?
I mean, I hope it does. I think, unfortunately, this was a terrible event that occurred, but I hope it unifies both sides a little bit and kind of calm down. Whenever, like, either side is calling someone a dictator or they're losing hope in democracy and stuff like that, that is, like, very critical and can change a huge opinion on someone. So, hope it changes.
How about you, Christian? Do you think it has much of an impact?
I think that beyond the fact that we can all say that there's no place for political violence in the United States of America, and I respect you, Rico, for what you did, and my thoughts are certainly with the family of the victim, and I'm glad to hear that those other victims that were there are in stable condition. But as for the rhetoric, I will say I was a bit disappointed, John, because when the Republicans less than 48 hours later adopted a platform for this election, it had everything from radical left-leaning Democrats weaponizing the federal government to getting rid of far left-leaning accreditors at universities. And I had hoped for a moment that we could have taken a step back in this moment and analyzed the fact that the other side is not our enemy. The other side is someone that we can work with. And I just didn't see that in the platform that was adopted, and that was upsetting.
Yeah, we'll come back and talk more about that. Rico, of course, you were front and center at that event. I think we should acknowledge that you had a speaking role before the president was there on site. You spoke to this rally as vice chair of the Beaver County, not Butler County. Be clear about that. And then you were there when the shots were fired and came to the aid of Corey Comparatori, who obviously is somebody that we mourn his loss. Tell me more about your reaction coming out of this. Do you think we've toned down the rhetoric at all?
First off, Corey is a hero. I want to put it out there first and foremost. And looking at the rhetoric that's coming from both sides of the aisle has to be one of caring and sharing, okay? We have to get out there. We have to be about the people, because that's what the bottom line, the basis for everything is the people, and we have to work together, because there is no one. We are a team. We got to make things happen for the people and not the individual.
Well, I think we all agree on that. But the problem is that politicians, and particularly in a heated campaign, as this event recedes further and further from memory. We've got 3 months to go, frankly, before the election. I think this rhetoric, I sensed it even at the RNC, and I'm sure it's going to be the same at the DNC. We're going to hear the same heated rhetoric, aren't we? Don't you think?
Yeah, 100%.
Rika?
I would agree. I would agree.
So in the end, it doesn't have much of an impact.
I mean, in terms of in the final analysis of the rhetoric, I think you're absolutely right. We had a couple of maybe decent days there. I thought President Biden's response was a strong one, called for unity right away. We've seen a lot of politicians, again, call for the temperature to be turned down. That's great, and that was nice leading into the RNC when there was some concern about security there, et cetera, et cetera. But no, I think ultimately you're right. Our memory span is short, and quickly we'll turn the page on this, and things will be back where they were.
Let's talk about the politics. And, you know, I always feel ill at ease talking politics when we've had deaths and injuries out of an event. But this is a political show, and we know that there's all kinds of political ramifications. Does this attempted assassination help former President Trump in this year's election? Rico?
I think that this attempted assassination on President Trump is a wake-up call. That there are people in this world who by any means will do anything that they feel is the right thing to do. People make the choice. So we have to be vigilant. We have to have a sense of security. And at this event, we didn't have that when this happened. So we need to bring that back to the American people.
Well, there's certainly no question that we need to get the security answers. Why did this happen?
Correct.
I do think it's important to point out that motivation, we don't know what motivated this 20-year-old Republican from Bethel Park. It could be totally non-political because I was there, remember in 1981, maybe some of you weren't born, but in 1981, when the attempted assassination of Ronald Reagan was done by John Hinckley, that was not for politics. He was trying to impress Jodie Foster, an actress, a young actress at the time. So, I mean, we don't know yet what was going through the mind of this guy. But in terms of whether or not politically this is going to be, can be used to some advantage for former President Trump, what do you think, Isabella?
I honestly think this is going to help his campaign significantly. Obviously, it was a tragic thing that occurred on Saturday, but I think people are unifying, they're coming together, and the fact that he still got up and put a fist in the air and told the crowd to fight, 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 just showed that he is not backing down at any time, and he is doing this truly for the good of the people.
So if this has political benefit for former President Trump in this year's election, how do Democrats counter that? Christian?
Well, my thought would be, and my immediate opinion on it is, I think that how much the media gives coverage to the next few weeks related to this assassination attempt plays a very critical role in it. If we get back to the issues, I think that the Democrats will win on the issues. But I think that if we actually stay in a news cycle where we're talking about what the motive of this person may have been and making them the martyr that they so desperately wanted to be, I think that that is actually counterintuitive. I think that we need to get back to the issues. President Trump has marched forward, and I think that it depends on what the news cycle might look like for the next few weeks.
Interesting. Do you feel the same way?
I do. I certainly agree with Isabel that I think that this has strong positive political ramifications is not the word I'm looking for, but for Trump, I think that this is a strong political moment for him because his party is now unified behind him. There was some division, even more division last week than there is this week, and we're seeing that at the RNC. The party is rallying behind him, and so the Democrats now need to do the same. We need to, whomever our candidate is going to be, and I'm sure we'll talk about this, it's time to unify and rally the Democratic Party too. It's the only chance we're going to have to beat Trump and Vance.
Yeah. And I do think that as we wrap up this segment, we want to always keep in mind Corey Comparatori, who passed away. We want to remember the two others who were injured, and we won't know the full status. We pray for full recovery. This should not have political ramifications, but we know that in real life America, any attempted assassination like this is going to have politics involved. Whether it's lasting through November, when it happens in July, we don't know. But I want to thank you for this very civil conversation about a very important topic. So we're going to wrap up our discussion there. And when we come back on Inside PA Politics, former President Trump picks the junior senator of Ohio as his running mate. Is this a smart choice? This is going to play in Pennsylvania next door. We're going to hear what our panelists think coming up. The Republican National Convention is underway in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and the GOP presidential ticket now has a vice presidential nominee. Senator from Ohio, J.D. Vance, first elected to the Senate in 2022. He comes from an Ivy League and hedge fund background and first made a name with his memoir, Hillbilly Elegy, about his family in Appalachia. Personally, I enjoyed the book. The movie, not so much. But we're here to talk politics, not book and movie reviews. He was also against Trump in 2016, at one point calling him America's Hitler. Now he's changed his tune, saying, unlike Trump's first vice president, Mike Pence, he would not have certified the 2020 presidential election as vice president, insisting on a different slate of electors from states like Pennsylvania. So what does Vance bring to the ticket? The campaign says he'll spend a lot of time in Pennsylvania. So before we get on to some other questions about Vance, let me just get a general view from our Republicans. What did you think of this appointment, J.D. Vance?
Honestly, I'm super excited. I am a big fan of J.D. Vance after learning about his story. I feel like he has truly lived the American dream, had a hard upbringing growing up, and then, he's a veteran. He was served in the Marines and, eventually made his way up to U.S. Senate in Ohio, and now he's running as Vice President of the United States. He can't get any better than that. So I'm really excited. He's young. He just has a lot. He's a father. He brings so much to the table as a candidate, so I'm super excited.
Great. We're going to get into some of those details in a minute. Rags to riches story, no question about it. Rico, what do you think?
As a veteran myself, knowing what it takes to be service before self and get in the community and help, I applaud Mr. Vance on this appointment to run as the vice president. I think it's he grew up in an area that, the steel towns were a boom. So he understands what it takes to take that step. He understands what they need in these underserved communities. He's also 39 years old, which I'm very happy to see.
Well, this is a panel of young folks, so I'm assuming you approve of the youngsters running. 39 isn't that young.
Watch that.
Yeah, I know, Shelley, sorry about that. So what do you think on the Democratic side? Was this a smart choice? There were lots of others. Marco Rubio was one. I had one delegate told me, Republican delegate said, I thought he might name a woman. So you never know. What do you think?
I hate to say, I think it was a very strong choice. I'm very involved at Miami University, my alma mater, which is really close to J.D. Vance's hometown of Middletown, Ohio. So he's been on my radar for a long time. He's young, he's energetic. I think he reads as not extreme. I think it is my hope that people are going to delve further into his real stance on the issues because there are some pretty extreme thoughts about abortion. And he's really shown himself willing to sort of hitch his wagon to Trump's star and do his bidding in that way. And I hope people are going to pay attention to that, not just the optics.
We'll come back to the record because some will say he's more extreme than Donald Trump on a number of issues like abortion.
Right.
Christian, what's your thought about J.D. Vance?
Well, if I were a betting man, I should have placed a wager on this because I called it a month ago. And it was 2 weeks ago at a dinner with some mutual friends that when asked and everyone was talking around the table who Trump might pick, I thought J.D. Vance was probably the most likely choice because he ties into the Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Midwestern Rust Belt area, and that's a critical battleground for Donald Trump. And so I think strategically that was the consideration there.
Let me just ask the basic question that we should ask of anyone picked to be vice president. Are they ready to be president of the United States? J.D. Vance, I'll point out, would be the second youngest vice president. The youngest, you go back 144 years to 1861. John C. Breckinridge was actually vice president for 4 years under President Buchanan. Anyone remember him?
Only one from Pennsylvania.
Yeah, he's the only one from Pennsylvania. And the fact is that he was 36. But most of our vice presidents have had more experience. Vance has been in the Senate for 18 months. That's about it. Never held any other government office. But neither did President Trump. He was elected and he held no office before he came. So I guess the question is, and you can think in terms of Kamala Harris, too, who I think has more governmental experience and has been vice president. But choosing a vice president really means this is the guy I think can be president. What do you think, guys? Do you think that J.D. Vance has what it takes to become president next year if Trump's elected and something happens?
Personally, I think he's ready. Just because you don't have 50 years under your belt doesn't mean that you're not ready. Clearly, we've seen President Joe Biden. He had, I don't even know how many years at this point, off and on office, and in my opinion, has not done a good job when it comes to the economy, immigration, healthcare, and et cetera. So I think he has a fair chance, and I think that he has a lot to bring to the table.
Rico, too young to be president?
I think it's the perfect age to be a president. I'm 34.
You're not eligible. You have to be 35.
That's true. But I believe that because he's young and because he is not truly immersed and involved in the political spectrum, now he has the ability to learn on a fresh and clean slate. That's the difference from any and everyone else besides President Trump.
Yeah, do you think youth is going to be an issue in this campaign?
Well, I think that his age is a strong factor for him. Whether he's ready or not, we don't know. He's untested and unproven. He doesn't have much of a record to look back on. He's a smart guy, there's no doubt about it. But I think if you put him at the top of the ticket today and asked people to vote for J.D. Vance for president, I'm not so sure. I don't think we know enough.
And Christian, final word on this one.
I always think about vice presidents like Lyndon Johnson when it comes to really wanting to achieve what you set out to achieve in your hallmark legislation. It takes years of time, commitment, and work throughout government in order to accomplish that. That's largely why Joe Biden got the infrastructure package pushed through. And, you know, he did the same thing for the Affordable Care Act when he served under President Obama. And so I do think experience matters in that role, and it can be critical.
No. Well, this is a good discussion. You know, we're going to come back and talk about the vice presidential nominees. We hope there's a debate in August coming up on this, and we'll have much more. Now, coming up on this show, will President Joe Biden still be the Democratic nominee? And where the voters stand on an alternative to President Biden? We'll get our panelists' take coming up. Welcome back to Inside PA Politics. I'm Jon Delano. President Biden has been weathering calls to step aside as the Democratic nominee for president since the first debate at the end of June. He has insisted he's going nowhere and says, quote, average Democrats are still with him, even as members of his own party's elite are not. Now, a new poll out Wednesday from the Associated Press shows nearly 2/3 of Democrats want Biden to withdraw. Among Democrats who responded to the poll between July 11th and 15th, 35% say they want Biden to continue running for president, while 65% say he should withdraw and allow his party to select a different candidate. But the real takeaway may be that most voters are just dissatisfied with both nominees, something we've known since even before the campaign started. Among the sample of all voters surveyed, 57% said Donald Trump should withdraw from the race, while 70% overall said that about Biden. So, is Biden wildly unpopular, or is this just an election between two historically unpopular, and I might say, elderly candidates? Let's start with that, and we're going to start on the Democratic side first. So, Shelley, is it time for Joe Biden to get out of the race?
I don't think he's going to. Is that an answer enough to your question? I think if you had asked me this question on Saturday morning, I would have said I was maybe 50-50 on whether or not I thought that was going to happen. After the shooting on Saturday, my guess is that party focus has shifted a little bit and that Biden is going to remain the candidate. And I think that's okay. I think we are all trying to keep in mind we're voting for an administration, we're voting for the future, and not necessarily just for that single candidate.
Christian, your thoughts on this?
I think that in 2020 and in this election, we're voting for a platform, not a person. And regardless of who the person at the top of the ticket is, we're voting for what America is going to look like 20 years from now. And I think that voters are conscious of that. And regardless of who ends up leading the top of the ticket, if it's President Biden or if it's anyone else, someone who supports the platform is ultimately what the voters will be considering.
Well, there is considerable difference between the Democrats and the Republicans on a number of issues. So the question of whether or not, though, when you vote for president, you tend to vote for the guy at the top of the ticket. You don't even care who's running for vice president, to be honest. It's the top of the ticket. So from a Republican standpoint, are you hoping Joe Biden stays in the race?
I do hope he stays in the race. I think, President Donald Trump will have a very strong chance of winning if President Biden stays in the race. Obviously, after that debate, pretty much all of America could see that he is severely declining mentally. So, I hope he stays in.
Rico, what do you think?
I think that President Biden should stay in the race. I think that he has a choice to make, and he's going to make the right choice for himself and not let anyone tell him what to do. So if he stays in, that's his choice, and we already know what he's capable of and what he does, just like President Trump.
Yeah. So if he stays in the race, can he win? Shelley?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'd make the argument that, to your point, yes, often we're voting for the person at the top of the ticket, but often people are also voting against the guy at the top of the other ticket. And I think that there is enough animus towards Trump, enough fear about what another Trump administration would do to this country, that Biden still could win. A Democrat could win because there are so many folks who don't want to see Donald Trump back in the Oval Office.
Christian, you feel the same way? Can Joe Biden get reelected?
Arguably, I think that this comes down to a choice that was made 4 years ago. And I think that largely, when it comes down to voters, they've made this decision already, and many of them will stick with it. The question is, can Biden maintain enough folks that voted for him over President Trump in the swing states in the last election? And I think President Biden can do that when it comes down to it. Again, getting back to the issues that matter.
We're going to have a lot of time in the fall to talk about that specifically, but thank you again, panelists. Time now to pause for another quick break. Thanks to our panelists, and thanks again to you for watching. Remember, our government is only as good as you make it. Be sure to vote. Have a great day, everyone.